Hi, and welcome back to Multicultural Marketing. In this next half, we will discuss equity, diversity in media, data challenges, and more about the role brands play in all of this. And now for a panel called Equity in the Metaverse, an important subject because there is a new world being created in the so called metaverse and Web3, which relate to crypto economics, blockchain technology, NFTs, virtual real estate, and augmented reality. There are real concerns that this new economy is already leaving people behind and that it's non inclusive, made for the already haves and excluding the have nots. There are accessibility questions, and our guests today are working in areas that are built to bring more people in, not fewer. So, thank you to the Ad Age audience today for watching. Do submit your questions in the comments on whichever platform you are watching. And now let's say hello to John Thompson of 1035, Anna Constantino of Nowhere, and Telly Wong of IW Group. Thank you, everyone, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, just to get right into it, I wanted to start off with John and your agency 1035. You're going all in on metaverse marketing in a lot of areas. And I just wanted to first start off like which projects you're most excited about and just talk about how you might talk to brands about topics like equity and inclusion.
Yeah. So, yeah. No. First of all, thanks Ad Age for inviting me and the fellow guests. We're really excited to talk about this topic. But yeah, no. About a month ago, actually, I moved over to 1035. 1035 has been embedded in culture since the beginning, and so what I pitched to 1035 before coming was, hey, the metaverse conversation, Web3 conversation is here, and you being in culture and always being a leader in culture, I think now is the time, better now than later, especially in a creator's world, that Web3 is to come in and start to make a difference. So, we're basically creating a separate entity that is focused on Web3 and bringing our current clients and new clients into the space. And really, right now, it's about exploration. The clients or brands, they're not really sure about the space and what they can do, and the safety issues. And to be honest, there's not a lot of agencies that have people that they can trust. So that's why I'm here now. And really what I'm most excited about is really a couple of things. One is the matchmaking. There's brands and there's tons of projects out there. What are the brands and projects that make sense? With one of the pioneers in the space, RTFKT. Nike bought them because they modeled themselves off of Nike originally, so it was a very authentic partnership there. And so I'm looking, what can we do similar, and then as well, the brands that are looking to build from the ground up, and really build their brand as a metaverse brand as well. So those are the most exciting things for me.
Yeah, RTFKT Artifact has been doing interesting projects with Nike since they've been bought and are sort of hot on the NFT markets, if I follow that correctly.
Yeah, they're definitely one of the top 3 to 5 projects. But yeah, and it's because it's a great partnership. Nike's one of the biggest brands, and people love Nike. So.
And Anna, we've talked before about this very subject, and you're at Nowhere, which is actually a place. It is somewhere, actually. And Nowhere is online. You go visit, and it's sort of, I had described it in a story I've written. It's sort of like a Zoom meets Clubhouse, where but it's in the metaverse. So you're sort of a video shell of yourself, and you get to travel around, and the audio is sort of spatially set up, so it's 3D audio, and it's a meeting place, and you can access it from anywhere, which was one of the key points that we had discussed, because you want to talk about accessibility and having this technology for Web3 be open to a lot of people. So I just wanted to ask again how Nowhere is sort of set up for multicultural exchanges.
Yeah, nowhere was our interpretation of how could we meet online while we were apart, right? It started as a pandemic baby. So how you can think about like if like a Fortnite and Zoom had a baby, and then like you come in with your video and move around. But from the beginning, it was the first thing we decided was like it needs to be accessible because we don't want to be something that just a group of people can come in. I'm from Brazil, and like I know access to equipment and good internet like there, which is like a country that has a lot of resources, but it's still like it's not that accessible. So it was like it doesn't make sense for us to create a space virtually that cannot be let other people be present, some part of people not be present. So all the decisions we make with the design of Nowhere is to make it very easy for people to navigate, understanding that the metaverse, the fact that you are in 3D in the internet already causes some, weirdness for all of us. And over time, like I've been working inside Nowhere for more than a year, and now I feel like absolutely comfortable. And for me, it's weird to be in a 2D window, right? Talking with others, but like this takes time. So we want it to be as easy as possible for people to come in and accessible as possible. So it's browser based. Everyone can come in just with a link. And there's obviously we are a startup, so we cannot address all the things that make a product equitable. So but we also rely on things that already exist. So it's possible, for example, to put closed caption because actually this is a tool that the Chrome browser already allows. So we are constantly trying to see how we can involve and like design for the most diversity into our product.
Yeah, and when you visit Nowhere, you sort of see it. It sort of reminds you of like a community center. There's a lot of cultural exchange going on there with the types of events that you do, art events, just sort of things you might see at any community center.
Yeah, it's like it's very interesting you say that because like before Nowhere, we were designing a conference for a client of ours. We had another company that we did art installations and designs for a movement that is called the New Public, which is like really talking about how can we look into the creation of public spaces in real life and translate to create healthier public spaces online. So we were designing for this conference, like going deep into this topic, and then the pandemic like happened, and we were like, where are the public spaces that I want to inhabit while I am, like at home? Where do I want to meet my friends? What type of relationships I want to have? And that's why we also made like our tools, like our metaverse is like video first, because we believe that like seeing facial expression also allows a lot for deeper connections and like empathy creation. When you're seeing each other, you feel more present and the opportunity to see that like we are actually not that different. When you're not seeing each other, it creates like more of a separation. So we try to create this tool actually, well, we have now an opportunity to create this virtual world that like really erases boundaries in a sense. So why don't we create that with all this like opportunity for togetherness and less of separation? So that's why even like the models of like how we are setting up like payment, and that conversation we had is like we thought multiple times we were like advised to do like a land sale, and then it just didn't make sense for us currently, like because that it just like it feels like we are we are starting separating from the moment that you're starting to say like some people can have a space and some other cannot, and we just don't want to be that sort of public space in the internet.
Accessibility, absolutely. And Telly, you've done some multicultural programs yourself dealing with Web3 and the metaverse. We saw McDonald's and a Lunar New Year activation. How did that come about, and what did that show you about how the metaverse could be a place for coming together?
Yeah, we've done two metaverse activations for McDonald's in the past few months. So their first one was a partnership we did with Offline TV, which is we took a in real life pop-up store and we sort of ported it over to the metaverse and we activated there. And that was a kind of a toe dip for the brand. And then during this past Lunar New Year in February, we launched something that we called the Hall of Zodiacs, which was essentially an activation in the metaverse where people could come in, learn what their Chinese zodiac sign was, and get their fortune for the new year. And the really cool thing about that was that this was a program that was primarily targeting the Asian American consumer in the U.S., but because it was virtual and it was opened up to the world, we had people dropping in from all over the place. So you would walk into the space and you would be talking to people from everywhere from Europe to South America to just like in LA, and it was a pretty amazing experience in terms of the cultural exchange that was happening. It was a real cultural dialogue that was going on with all the guests that were attending this activation.
And in terms of just sort of, John, maybe your activities going around in the metaverse, NFT projects, how Web3 is shaping up. How do you see the topic of equity and inequality in certain areas? How does it come up in terms of your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, with as we think about equity in the metaverse, for me it's the same as equity in any other any other platform for marketing. So I mean, or not even marketing. I mean, I used to work at Kroger, and one of the things that we talked about was we need to have more diverse vendors. So honestly, what it is going to come down to is the brands or the agencies that are working with the brands. So the selection process, Web3 it's a creator's economy. There's obviously people will have the money, but they can't do anything. They can't grow their ecosystem without creators, and so it's going to come down to the brands and the agencies that are working with those brands to find who the creators are, find who created these platforms and the new tech that is going to come over the next 10, 20 years, and work with those people. Work with many different cultures. Either if you're U.S. based, work with many different cultures within the U.S., or if you're global, the same. What Telly was just talking about, people communicating in the same area. What's great is that there don't have to be locations. Everyone can be in the same location and everyone can interact, but it's going to be for in this sense, it's going to be on the tech companies. How are they going to create tools, translator tools, so people really can truly immerse and truly communicate with each other from across the world? So everyone's going to have their role, but so it's going to come down to really looking across all cultures, looking across all communities, and I'm in a lot of NFT projects. The projects within the discords that have separate channels and separate servers for different countries and different languages. Those usually are the better projects as well. So I mean, it's great that it's a creator's economy. So that's going to help. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to those brands and the people with money who are building it to be conscious about who they're selecting.
Absolutely. And Telly, you're working with brands like we mentioned McDonald's, and there are topics like brand safety that have to come up. And then there are also topics like, how do you make sure you're respecting different cultures, respecting diversity?
Right.
What brands need to do to make sure they're doing that? It seems like a challenge for Web3.
It is a challenge, but obviously I think corporate social responsibility is going to be essential in building Web3 and the metaverse, because you're talking about the metaverse natives are going to be Gen Zers, and we know that corporate social responsibility is is something that they value very highly with brands. So I think it's going to be inevitable. And then in terms of just increasing equity, I think we're already taking different steps from different sectors. So like today, for example, President Biden announcing that he's going to increase high-speed internet access to lower income communities. And I think moves like that are going to open up the metaverse to everyone and everywhere.
That's a good point, and that brings Anna to you too. If that actually more internet access or more access to areas like nowhere or that sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the like why we are designing or developing is the biggest challenge. Like to make sure that like the different types of internet and different type of machines, and we can put everyone together. So like we need to be very smart on how to develop the design of how people navigate the spaces to fit the most people and everyone have the best experience and all that with what they have in hand, right? So because we know that it's still not for everyone, but we are doing a lot of effort to make it the most like a light, the lightest like a platform as possible. So it also runs on phones because we know like most of the planet actually has access to better, newer phones than computers. And it's still most of the metaverse, it's easier to access through computers, right? So it's still like by default, it's like removing a lot of people from it. So we are trying to make an application that is like that everyone can access from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on that. When I was at Ogilvy, we met with Decentraland and we met with Sandbox, and great things about both platforms, both games. But at the time, one of the reasons we continued to speak with Decentraland was because they did have a web browser, and Sandbox. It's going to take a while before they get to that point. So what's important for brands as well is how many people can we reach whenever we create an activation or a campaign, wherever that is. And so in this case being the metaverse.
Yeah, and just to quickly add to that, when we did our activations for McDonald's, we did offer the option of whether it's going on a computer and accessing it that way or having the full headset experience. And we saw the majority of people that were joining our events were joining through their computers versus their headsets. So we're not quite there yet. And obviously those cost a bit of money. And I think right now a web-based metaverse is probably where we're going to be at for the next couple of years.
Those are all very good points, because VR headsets, we're talking about exclusivity. There's costs associated with that. If you can get, and as we started the conversation, getting through at a browser level is a lot more accessible. I was going to raise the one example I saw with TBWA Paris that I think I mentioned before we came on, is that so TBWA, they do this project, and I thought it spoke in some ways how marketers are thinking about the topics we're talking about here. So they came up with the first homeless avatar in the metaverse. So the campaign was meant to highlight unhoused populations and let people in the metaverse not forget that there are people in the real world who still need help. And I wanted to get your thoughts on how brands can do sort of those kinds of reminders and actually help in some ways. Maybe Telly, you could start.
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned from working on some of these recent projects is doing something in the metaverse isn't much different than doing something in person in terms of how you produce it, how you organize it, and some of the things you want to keep in mind in terms of what values you're trying to express and what messages you're trying to put out there. So as I mentioned earlier, social issues and social justice is going to be top of mind as we continue to build this metaverse, and that's just going to be something that needs to be integrated into these brand activations. There needs to be a purpose for all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to his point, in I don't know how much they still do this, but growing up in grade school, some schools they go to, they go to prisons, or some school they go to a homeless a part of the city. These things can now be created through a metaverse platform, and you can experience it that way. And I think that brands or not necessarily brands, maybe more nonprofits are looking at that. But there are many different ways. And what's great is that you can show people everyone's experience, and you can get that empathy that you may not be able to get in Web2 or any other platform, because you actually can draw on that.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of projects that do try and recreate certain experiences. We've seen it for refugees, I think, where you're trying to show people who don't understand the experience maybe a deeper level through Web3 technologies. But it's also tricky, I think, because you do have to be careful that you're not being disrespectful when you do these projects too.
So that's why I said nonprofits. I think that showing the experiences, and then potentially showing like what your donations or money or help can do to advance those experiences. I mean, even one of the things I'm in Cincinnati, and it's the real estate is it's growing a lot, but also there's a lot of buildings in the lower income areas that that there needs to be work done to them. And there's a friend of mine who we were speaking the other day, and we were saying, what if we just got a picture of a map, or took a map and then worked with developers to show exactly what these buildings could look like with funding, and then use those and make those NFTs and actually raise the funding to make it look exactly like that. So there are things that people aren't thinking about now, because a lot of people are just thinking about making money. But I think social impact is going to be one of the biggest uses for Web3.
And that's something that we're pitching a lot as well, with some of the upcoming projects, is a social component and partnering with some nonprofit organizations. Because I think with crypto that we could, there's a lot could be done for social good.
We're gonna run out of time tonight. I could probably talk to all of you all day about these. Are just such interesting topics and ways that we could explore the metaverse in these important ways. I did want to ask Anna a little bit before I do let you go. What about women in the metaverse? Are there enough projects that are geared toward women? And sort of, it's also can be a tough place for women in virtual reality, and getting that real interaction. It could be a harsh place sometimes. We've seen stories, so I want to get your thoughts.
I might be a little biased towards, like I have wonderful women around me. I'm part of like a groups of women in the metaverse and women in Web3. So like I'm seeing a lot of very powerful women in the space. But obviously, like I think in tech in general, it's like unfortunately heavier on the men's side, and like I guess like this is like a historically like from culture where women like it's not empowered about like how good they can be with the math and engineering and things like that, and we end up like on this position where leaders of tech are not women. But there is fantastic women doing great projects and all the sides, like on DeFi, on like platforms, on NFT. So I guess like it is important us to give light, to these projects, and always like be remembering that, since we know when we are talking about equity that yes, we don't come on a level plane once we're talking about tech in general, and that also reflects on when you're talking about in metaverse.
Now, before I do let all of you go, maybe briefly, are there any upcoming projects that either any of you would like to call out in terms of brands, or any other sort of NFT Web3 projects?
I wish, but there's a couple that I can't speak about. And I hear that a lot in the brand world now, because they're all in in the process of being created and built, and everyone wants to, you know, come out and really come out swinging. So
we'll talk about them when you're able to. Then Kelly,
Same here. Yeah, we're working
well,
on a number of projects for different clients, and we're just kind of waiting for the right time to announce them.
is there for you, Anna, anything coming up?
Yeah, next week there's a tomorrow conference, which is a conference that happens in Serbia about Web3, and they're going to be streaming all the content into Nowhere. So people are going to be able to watch the conference and participate in the metaverse with other people.
Very cool. A Web3 conference from Serbia streaming into Nowhere.
Yes. Yeah. So it's one of the biggest tech conferences in Europe. And then they are focusing on Web3 and NFTs this year.
Well, thank you for all of you for joining me today, and I would love to talk more with you whenever you're all free. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And next up is Janine Poggi with a discussion about diversity in media. So hi, Janine.
Hi, Garrett. Thank you so much. That was interesting, given the whole like building of the metaverse and how we're just at like such the early stages of it, and what the opportunities are if you prioritize inclusivity and thinking about, you know, multicultural to make sure you're building from the ground up a more inclusive platform. I think it's an interesting opportunity there.
Yeah, I think all of the guests had interesting perspectives on what they're going to be able to do in that area. So it was a good conversation.
Thanks, Garrett.
Bye, Janine.
Bye. And as a reminder for those of you watching at home, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels. We will try to get to them during our conversations. As we head into this year's all-important upfronts, when media sellers look to make a bulk of their ad commitments for the next season, brands and agencies are once again being called upon to shift some of their ad spending into diverse-owned media channels that are often overlooked. Major brands and agencies made commitments last year to this end. And in this next session, we will take a look at what progress has been made and what really needs to happen next. I am joined by Isabel Rafferty, founder and CEO of Canela Media, Ryan Robertson, Senior VP of Marketing at Group Black, and Joy Profit, Executive VP and Head of Growth and Operations at Magna Global. Hello, everyone.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. Ryan, I'm loving your background right now. Very colorful. It's awesome.
Thank you. I got tired of looking at a boring white background myself on the screen, so we had to make a change.
I'm getting tired of my background too. I need to move soon, that's for sure. Well, thank you all for joining us. Last year, of course, we saw a bunch of brands and agencies make pledges to shift more ad dollars into diverse-owned media. Isabel, I'd like to start with you. What have you seen of those efforts?
What I have seen? I've seen a huge improvement. I mean, if in the positive side, yes, it's much better than before. I do think that we're getting a seat in the table in conversations that before the door were not open. So I've seen a change. However, sadly, I feel still the same brands that have always done multicultural. They're more excited to go deeper. But a lot of the people have never done multicultural, still not doing it. So I wish I could see more new names. But in the good side, people are investing more, but there's long ways to go still.
So there might be a bit more money coming in, but it's more money from the same brands versus some new money.
Yes.
Joy, what are you seeing? You know, Magna Global last year made a commitment, 2% of clients' ad spend going towards diverse-owned media channels. What is the state of that, and what have you seen from your clients?
So our commitment, actually, we made a 5% commitment by 2023.
Right.
So we gave ourselves a little bit of a runway to get there, because we do know Magna does both investment for media brands, but we also do intelligence. So we know that supporting the investment decisions and the thesis to go deeper in Black-owned media, we had to present the data, and we had to present the insights and the why. We get a lot of those questions on the why do we have to go deep in diverse-owned, versus versus a diverse targeted, or maybe in some cases even just total market. But to your point, we're progressing nicely. There's a nice trajectory to get to that 5% aggregate investment. I think that the opportunity to have upfronts, in our case, equity upfronts, and now more and more mainstream upfronts that are inviting our diverse-owned partners to be a part of that, showcasing these opportunities, but then also the data insights education. I think we're seeing more brands activate and lean in a deeper way. And for us, actually, for our equity upfront this past year, our participation doubled. So not only are some existing brands that were activating 13 months ago active, but I think we are starting to Isabella's point, to see more and more come in as we showcase more. We're starting to see more and more come in and activate.
Are you seeing, to Isabella's point, this being really brands that maybe were already playing in the space and already doing some investment, or these brands that have maybe never invested in these channels before?
I think we're seeing both. To Isabella's point, there are some who have been active who are themselves making those commitments, publicly going public and saying, we're going to do 7% or we're going to do 2%, whatever the case may be. And to be honest, wherever they're starting is a good point and a place really to show growth over time. But I think for those that have not been active, they're dipping more of the toe in and sometimes a full foot into the door to just get to know partners and to thankfully have those one-to-one planning strategy meetings. So I think on our end, we're seeing both, albeit at different pace, at a different pace point, depending on what the brand or who the brand is.
And Ryan, Group Black started, if I'm going to probably be wrong on this, maybe a little over a year ago, I want to say.
Less than a year.
Little less than a year. Okay, time means nothing anymore to me. So a little less than a year ago to sort of help in these efforts. Can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of progress? Where have brands fallen short? Where is progress really being made right now?
Yeah, so I think, Janae, I think, like you said before, we definitely saw companies and brands pledging to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, right, in diverse-owned media, and specifically Black-owned media. And I mean, we all know that sometimes even the best intentions fall short, right, of the mark. And that's really why Group Black exists, to really help to grow and strengthen Black-owned media so that brands and marketers can reach these audiences at scale and use their buying power to help create this lasting change that we all want to see, right? And so at Group Black, we've seen some early adopter client and agency partners really following through in a big way. So folks like Group M, Target, Ford, Frito-Lay, P&G, to name a few. Partners like these have really stepped up to truly walk the talk. And we continue to be hopeful that there are exponentially more who are and will live up to these commitments. But I think that there have been, to the point of my fellow panelists, there have been some companies that have been in this ship for a while and are continuing to keep that pressure on. But there are also some new players there, and the hope is that we will see exponentially more come down the pike very soon.
Ryan, what does walking the talk look like? You made a point, committed hundreds of millions of dollars, but to put into perspective, like the upfront marketplace is a $20 billion business. TV overall is a $70 billion business. So when you say hundreds of millions, it's far less than what's actually being exchanged, during just the upfronts alone. So what does walking the talk look like? So
I think to your point, it should be billions. No question about that, kind of given the investment in media generally. But I mean, for us, I think walking the talk is that brands are committing, but then making sure that these are long-term and sustainable investments well beyond just this moment in time, right? So I think, speaking from a Group Black perspective, like our mission is to dramatically transform the face of media ownership and investment, right? And we've kind of coined this term, the inclusion age, which is really kind of a time when we no longer have to fight for diversity and inclusion. And maybe even those words become obsolete because they're no longer needed and there is equity across our community and our industry. But the piece that is super important is creating equity doesn't happen in a year, right? It doesn't happen in 5 years. It happens with consistent, continuous investment, access, and opportunities over time, and really in perpetuity. So to me, that's what walking the talk means, right? It's starting that, but then committing to this investment and this sustainable investment in perpetuity.
In one of our earlier sessions, Rob Master at Unilever was talking about how in the early days of Facebook, he sat down with them and helped them like shape what their ad model would be long before that they were committing a good chunk of dollars there. They were talking about how do you like shape what's required to get Unilever's dollars. And I'm curious if part of this, is certainly about money, and that is probably one of the more important parts of it. But then there's also another part about like just helping brands grow. And Isabel, I'm curious, how much is being done in terms of brands and agencies looking to work with media partners to actually help them get them where they need to be, so that an agency or a client can turn around and say, yes, these are the types of brands and the scale and the programmatic opportunities and the things like that, they exist there. But how much partnership is happening?
I think there's some brands, and again, it's to me, I don't want to be, it's the same brands, but the brands are being committed in the past to multicultural audiences are saying, how do we take this to the next level? For example, General Motors and McDonald's has been one of those partners that says, how do we take this to the next level to ensure we're supporting these founders, ensuring that this is sustainable and stays and is at the highest level of the company. So for example, McDonald's created an advisory board created by all founders that are supporting all founders, minority-owned founders. And we meet directly with the CMO. We have a meeting with her and we tell her how the industry is doing, where's opportunities, how can McDonald's support our business to grow deeper. I was just in Detroit, the same thing with General Motors, and we're meeting with our CMO. So it's relationships at the top of the brands and figure out how do we support in a deeper way the communities. Those are the things that are making a change. They have to be directly at the brand level, and it has to be directly at the C level. So it has to be something that the whole culture, the whole company embraces. So there is a few brands that are really thinking deeper on how to create these relationships with founders, with minority-owned companies, but there are few.
Isabel, staying with you for then a minute, how do you think, or what does the industry need to do then to make more brands come in and do things that maybe a smaller group of brands are currently doing?
They had to see that doing business with a minority-owned business, it makes business sense. So we need to be able to show analytics and results. So they say, this is not a charity. This makes business sense. This minority-owned business can help me in a very key element that is being able to be authentic, being able to provide a deeper connection with our audience, which translates to business results. So I think all this movement that we're doing has to be very tight with analytics, with research, with results, because everybody it has to make sense for the business. And I think we can prove it, but we have to be able to show those numbers.
Let's stick with the conversation of analytics and measurement and all of that. There's obviously a lot of conversation, even in the broader marketplace, about the upheaval in measurement and issues in measuring TV and media in general. What are the challenges in trying to place ad dollars if a network isn't measured, or if it's hard to actually tell how large the audience is? Joy, what do you think there in terms of like the challenges surrounding measurement and this shift in ad dollars?
Well, thankfully, the entire industry, so whether it's diverse-owned media, general market media, everyone is looking at new currencies, and brands are open, and agencies are partnering with brands to look at new currencies. And there's a lot of different players out there that are offering different opportunities. But to your point, and I think Isabel mentioned this as well, data and insights really have continued to stay at the forefront of this conversation. And we've had to really answer a lot of the critical questions. I mean, brands are asking the critical questions. Can diverse audiences be reached in general market? Can diverse audiences be reached in diverse targeted media? And what are the business outcomes of investing in diverse owned media? We've had to really answer those questions. And thankfully, our research and the results have really shown that when you go deep with a diverse owned media property, you do generate incremental scale in your media. So 27% of Black audiences, for example, 18 plus, are reached by Black owned TV. And so that there's a large percentage of Black viewers that are reached by Black owned media. They're not reached by general market. And the same story, we could also talk about that same story extending beyond Black owned into Hispanic owned, where we know that you can add at least 2.4% of incremental reach to an existing buy when you go with a Hispanic owned media company. So the analytics are there, the numbers are there. I do think it takes time to socialize those results and to really prove the case that really going deep with diverse owned, it's not just charity, as was earlier mentioned. Of course, we do believe that there is a societal impact and a societal gain, but there's also a salient business outcome when you're partnering with these platforms in the long run.
And when you talk about analytics, it's also important that it's not all groups are the same and they act differently. So having analytics on the Black community might be different than the analytics on the Hispanic community and the AAPI community, and understanding what those are and how they relate to each group is, also takes just the bandwidth and the work of making sure that they put that time in to understand how each community is interacting with media differently and what types of media. Ryan, what other issues are, you seeing in these efforts? Specifically, one of the things that comes up is the lack of inventory that is potentially available to meet demand. Is that true? Is there a lack of inventory out there?
Look, I think there is, I think inventory is a barrier given kind of the immense dollars that have been recently committed to this space, right? And so I think the opportunity is, how do we grow inventory in these audiences so that the pie just gets bigger and bigger and bigger? I think another has been like, how do we help to grow and scale these Black-owned media properties, right? So how are we using our collective power and audiences to symbiotically benefit each other? I think that's why the Group Black model is so powerful, right? We have over 150 Black-owned media brands in our collective. And as a result, we can kind of originate a program or some content with one partner, but scale it across a much broader Black-owned media ecosystem and varying audiences, right? So this way, instead of one media partner benefiting, for example, you now have 15 different Black-owned media brands that benefit from the same program. Oh, and by the way, the reach and scale is significantly increased for brands, which is kind of the point that Joy was making earlier. So I think that that inventory has kind of been a barrier, but I think the bigger opportunity is, how do we, as we strive to grow that inventory and those audiences, how do we leverage kind of the power of collective and us pulling together to then scale it just much more broadly from just one property?
Do you think we'll see more of the coming together of diverse media channels in order to build that scale?
That is the hope. The hope is that we are so much stronger together than we are disparately, and so I think that that's kind of what our model is built on, and the hope is that we are all. This is a moment where we can all band together and symbiotically kind of create this media ecosystem that helps folks to grow and scale. One of the other pieces that I think is pretty interesting, Janine, you had asked before, is around measurement, right? Which I think, again, continues to be a challenge, specifically diverse on media, just because of the cost of kind of third-party verification and that kind of thing. So I think that it's interesting because on the surface, while many of the measurement questions and metrics that brands are looking for appear to be simple, they really require vast amounts of data and a lot of third-party verification, which is a lot of money for these media properties, right? And many of the partners we've been working with have been primarily focused on building their brand and honing their editorial craft and cultivating their community and audiences, right? And so I think that one way really to take down more dollars is to stop or halt some of the over insistence on these 5 layers of third-party verification, and instead focusing on kind of the context of the buy, right? Really challenging kind of ourselves to say, what are the 1 to 2 things that we really need to measure to determine the success, right? Versus tracking every metric that we could possibly capture and think of. And it's interesting that we're still in a place where agencies and brands are insisting that media companies send 25 column reporting spreadsheets each week, right? To report on all of these metrics. And so I really think that the future of measurement is going to be less about, did someone see the ad, right? Like impressions, and more on, did they truly see and feel something from that, right? Attention, relevance, emotional metrics, all of them, I really feel are better longer term predictors of brand impact and brand health. And so, yeah, I would just say stuff personally, I would shout out somebody like Charles Cantu and Reset Digital, if you guys know them, on the work that they're doing, really leading the cognitive messaging measurement approach, because I really think that's really where kind of measurement needs to go and where it's going in the future. Sorry, I said a lot, but
No,
I had a lot. There was a lot on my chest about that.
Isabel, Canela Media hosted its new front last week. I'm curious how you're thinking about building scale around the Hispanic audience.
Great question. I think we have two different approaches. We have our own and operated properties, which is our streaming properties, Canela TV, Canela Music, and soon to launch Canela Kids in August 16. But I think we believe what it was just shared, stronger we're together. So beyond Canela, we have a partner with over 180 Spanish content publishers where we represent their ad sales. We represent their ad sales because with that combination, we're the third largest media company for Latinos, reaching 50 million Latinos, but we're able to really help where we're good at, which is measurement, being able that they can compete in front of the brand. So we're able to say, yes, if the game is viewability, we can provide viewability, scale, Nielsen Dark, whatever is needed, because we are together exclusively. Everything that we work with our exclusive partners, we're able to provide that scale brands want, that measurement they need. So we can go head to head with the general market and say, let me prove to you, yes, the metrics you're looking for, I can give them to you. I can compete in that space, but I can give you something beyond that, which is that authenticity, that emotional connection that if you were to measure it, which you're not, which you should, you will see how I'm able to drive better business results. So being able to solve that scale concern, I think, has been key for us through our partnerships. But it's important I agree with the team, with panelists, to be able to say, what is the most important metric, right? As advertisers, we're trying to push a product. What is more important? How many impressions I hit that user? Really, that what you achieve is an audience. Or if they see it, did that drove a result? Did that create an emotional connection to my user? That's more important. Nobody's measuring that. And I think that's where brands are so focused in something and they're forgetting the big picture.
Joy, I know that Magna is still on its 5% journey and that, you have a bit of time before fully getting there, but what needs to happen next to grow the pot? Like, what are some of the things you're putting in place now so it's not just hitting that 5% and stopping there, but going on and what comes after that?
Yeah, I mean, I personally would, and I've been both on the agency side as well as working for a Black-owned media company, and I do believe that I agree. It's you want to think about all of the KPIs. It's not just reach, it's not just scale, but where are we really deeply engaging an audience? And I think that from what we have seen over our Equity Upfront, we also have hosted monthly equity sessions where we're just showcasing the capabilities, the unique content strategy for all of these innovative, in some cases emerging diverse-owned partners. And really there's innovative ways that they're not only telling their stories, but that they're capturing deep engagement with their audiences. And to me, it's just really exciting to see. But to your point, I think that more and more, one of the things that has been helpful and that will continue to be useful is not just, pledges are great. And I think that we need them as a first step, but I think we also need to begin telling those stories, looking at the case studies, more brands, as Isabel talked about, some of those brands that have been active in this space for a long time. Let's talk about how they've partnered for long-term relationships, or maybe it's branded content partnerships or sponsorships or experiential platforms now that we're coming back into in-person. Let's talk about not only why we're doing this, but how we're doing this in a way that's successful for both the brands, the media partners, and the audiences. We can't lose sight of the importance of these audiences that are not only influential, the buying power is there, they're affluential, they really are changing the face, I think, of this globe. And so it's really exciting to see these partnerships and relationships come together and build over time in the long run. But those case studies showing us how we can get there, I think has been really important for our clients to see.
I do have something to say about the pledges that bothers me.
I was just going to ask the question, like maybe all of you can answer this, and Isabel, you could start. Do pledges work?
Here's the problem with pledges. They could work, but the issue is that we all get grouped into one pledge, every single minority group. And I've been able to go into those pledges, see some internal numbers, and what happens is the Latino segment gets the smallest piece of that pie. Why? because sadly, not a lot of Latinos have been certified or they don't meet the criteria needed here. And even though it's the largest group of that minority segment, we get the smallest piece. So creating these pledges is hurting the Hispanic media space more than helping it, because they reach that segment with other segments and they forget about the Latino community. So as a Hispanic media group, yes, pledges are fantastic, but let's not, I think the pledges have to go now for specific segments, and they have to be representative of the percentage of the community they serve. Latinos is the fastest growing segment in the US. And when you look at those pledges, we're always the segment that receives the less dollars. So that's why I'm not a fan of the pledges. If it's pledged for the US Hispanic community, absolutely, and make business sense. Don't give me the whatever is left.
Yeah, I love that. I think pledges should be specific, to your point, Isabel. Joy, I loved your idea on like case studies and brands that have.
I think we maybe lost Ryan.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
I hear you now.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Sorry. No, I was saying I love Joy's idea of kind of the case studies and showing brands that have done it well, because I honestly don't see how the business case can be more clear, but apparently we need to make it a bit more clear. The thing that I would say, Janine, to answer your question, I think pledges are great, but we don't need more pledges, right? We need brands to start spending. I like to borrow a phrase from our co-founder and chairman, Rich Dennis, when he says, we need to go from commitments to capital, right? We need brands to greenlight these programs and media and content ideas from Black and Hispanic-owned creators and media. Work with them on measurement. Like, I truly feel like momentum begets momentum, and the best way to start is to start. So that would be my kind of response to, like, do we need more pledges and are they working? I think accountability is what really makes the pledges work.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Joy, Ryan, and Isabel, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Be well.
You too.
So as we touched on during this session, one of the biggest issues in rethinking media spend involves inequities in data and measurement. And next up, we have Ad Age reporter Jack Neff to lead a session looking at how to navigate these challenges. Hi, Jack.
Hello. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks so much.
Sure. And hello and welcome to our panel on inequities in data and measurement. This has been an issue in the marketing industry for decades, if not longer. But there's little evidence that things have gotten a lot better. The issue is, however, getting a lot more attention of late, and this is part of that, I hope. And with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Louis Carr, President of Media Sales for BET Networks. Corinna DeBarro, Executive VP and Managing Director of Multicultural Business Solutions for Horizon Media, and Roberto Ruiz, Executive VP of Strategy and Insights for Televisa Univision. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our panel. Louis, I thought I would kick things off with you. It seems like multicultural representation in TV measurement has been an issue for decades. Why do you think things haven't gotten better faster? Louis, we're having an issue with your audio. It looks like it's muted. Bottom left of your screen, there should be you can click that to unmute. Okay. Roberto, we'll move on to you with that question. You've been following this for a while as well. Why do you think things haven't gotten better faster than they have?
Well, I if we track back to the beginning of the Nielsen panel, things did get better when the Hispanic panel was created, and the panel, represented sort of the census, the country for a while. Then we had these COVID issues that, caused sort of the panel integrity to lapse. But I guess you're leaning more towards, the alt measurement or new ways of measurement. And I think the supply and demand issue, as the demand for advanced advertising grows, as brands continue to look for growth, and they understand, for example, that Hispanics are a source for growth, they're undermarketed, then the question starts of, okay, what are we doing in the area of Hispanic measurement? And are these new tools and techniques really representative of the audience and the universe? And I guess that's where we are right now. We're in a sort of perfect storm, because the panel has experienced some issues. Nielsen is, under competitive pressure, to put it mildly. And then there are other, a series of other players coming up, trying to come up with alternative measurement techniques and tools, but those are just not fully representative as we speak.
It does seem that the undercounting that ultimately cost Nielsen its MRC accreditation did disproportionately affect households with people of color. Isn't that ultimately something that makes this a bigger issue for everybody, ultimately?
Well, look, I think it did affect more people of color, and I think that's a consequence of the fact that Hispanics and African Americans and other minorities are harder to recruit, harder to maintain. So when the COVID challenges happened, that area of the panel was more affected. You could argue that, well, not for every demo and every city the panel was projectable, but you could still make projections. But yes, I think this provided an opening for other companies to say, hey, you know what, this is not as perfect as it seems, or as perfect as it was before, and we have a solution. And that's why you're seeing, that in this upfront, there's several pledges to start transacting on other tools. But as I've told you before, I think there's a huge risk. And the risk is that we jump headfirst into something that is just not ready from the multicultural perspective. It's promising, but it's not ready.
Karina, tell me some about the communications and media planning tool that you recently helped to co-develop with Nielsen.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hello, everyone. So earlier this month, we announced the launch of Embrace. With Embrace, we set out to address the inequities that exist in survey panel data, where insights and outcomes are often skewed to the largest population, leaving diverse segments unheard and unaddressed. We at Horizon developed the idea and our overarching purpose, and we partnered with Nielsen to develop the software and data solution for us. And as part of this effort, Nielsen agreed to expand the sample population to include more diverse respondents. So by boosting and recalibrating the population and survey panel data, we were able to create a data-informed and equitable approach to identify strategic and inclusive business imperatives. The output that we get from Embrace is an equity index score that is based on a brand's cultural and business priorities that is then exported into our other planning tools, resulting in more inclusive and actionable insights and media decisions to drive, hopefully, better connections, resonance, and business outcomes.
Do you think that better planning at the outset with a tool like this is something that's going to help measurement issues down the road as well in developing the media plan?
I think that is the hope, right? Often when we look at the data that we leverage for those insights and to make the business case for multicultural, they do not provide an equitable lens. So we do need to question that data and start to validate the data that we use to make that case, because you will expect that upfront, those business and media decisions that we make will be informed by an equitable lens, but that is not always the case.
I'm going to channel some insights from Lewis while we wait for him to get back on here, hopefully. But one thought that he's had is that as we look at alternative measurements, that there's more of a focus on getting the general market numbers right rather than the multicultural audiences right. Do you think that's the case, Roberto?
Absolutely. Yes. Well, and you probably can't fault them because it's a lot easier to get the so-called general market. Initially, there are well, first of all, let's address the big challenge here, which is the over-the-air component of television, for example. So Hispanics, African Americans are over-indexed in over-the-air. And while I'm optimistic that some of the tools like ACR, right, connected TV, smart TV, will and provide a solution to this, you have to now project and understand, who's on the other side of that screen. If you talk to any of these large big data providers, they're going to tell you that they're working with census data, and census is this proxy for big data sets. But in reality, what they're doing is working with a data set that is device based. And the big move is from panel to devices, not from panel to census. And devices, we don't know who's on the other side of the device. And that's a lot harder. That's going to be hard for everybody, by the way. Personalization is going to be hard across the board, but it's going to be harder for minority populations because there are more nuances, right? I mean, how do you define from a device perspective who is Hispanic? A device is not Hispanic, a person is Hispanic, right? And how do you understand language usage if that's important to you? Language usage to Nielsen and the panel is through a question. Here, well, can you use a proxy for how do I have my browser set up or my operating system on my phone? Well, 85% of Hispanics have their phone set up in English. So, and we see these in people that access our sites that are 100% in Spanish. So I'm giving these examples to highlight just the challenges on, moving from this device tech big database from the panel to this. So one idea that's been talked around is, are these companies going to need a calibration panel? Right. And I understand Karina and her using Nielsen for their system because Nielsen will have this component. Nielsen will have the over-the-air, and now they will also have, they're incorporating set-top box data. So Nielsen is not sitting still. I think the overall, the overall consequence of this movement is positive for the industry because Nielsen is trying to be more innovative. So it's classic business, right? More players, more competition, more innovation, and this is going to take us to a better place where hopefully we will have multiple measurement tools. Maybe 12 to 18 months away, but I'm hoping this will happen.
Karina, do you think that the initial focus has been on the general market rather than fixing multicultural measurement, or do you see some progress on both fronts?
I agree with Roberto. I think the focus has been to fix measurement, but not necessarily from a multicultural lens. So I do think that this presents an opportunity for us to ensure that these new solutions that are coming to the market also solve for the underrepresentation that exists in TV measurement, right? I will hope that more people actually apply that lens and that critical gathering of data to ensure that it was representative, but it doesn't always happen naturally. So it is our responsibility to really push for that.
Louis, have we got you back?
You tell me.
Yes, we did. Welcome back, my friend. Good to hear your voice. You've said getting measurement, and we were just having this discussion that you think there's been a focus on getting the general market measurement right rather than multicultural. Do you think that's the case, and is that kind of what's been holding back more progress in this area?
Well, I think people are looking at it in boxes and versus looking at it as a whole. I think when you look at the contribution of African Americans and Hispanic to the whole, it shouldn't be sort of like a secondary box because they are sort of the foundation and the drivers of the overall usage. So I think they should look at it differently, saying that I can't fix it one at a time. I've got to fix it all together. And I think when they start to look at it like that, even if I fix general market, but I don't fix Black and Hispanic, it's still wrong. So I think that's where they have to sort of change their view and then change how they're trying to fix it.
Louis, I know you've been having this conversation for a long time with Nielsen and in the industry, just in terms of trying to improve measurement. Do you feel like there is actually progress? Are you being heard?
I think we're being heard, but I don't know if it's a resource issue where they don't have enough resources, or is it a prioritization, or what it is. But I think it's only going to improve when competition forces them to improve. Because as long as they are sort of the 500-pound gorilla in the room, they can continue to delay it. But I think with the sort of rise of Video Amp and iSpot and some of these other companies that are coming to fruition, I think they're going to be forced to.
Roberto, I know you're on the advisory board, I think, for Video Amp, I believe possibly also for 605, and you talk frequently on issues with Nielsen. Do you feel like your concerns are being heard? Do you see solid progress?
Yeah, I'm on the Video Amp Advisory Council, and we actually had a meeting in Miami a month and a half ago. Definitely think they are hearing our concerns. Definitely think they are making progress. I think that that Ross and his team have the right approach to the challenge. It's just complex. It's just complex, and as I told you before, there's a bunch of PhDs in there and people with great expertise. So I'm optimistic we'll find a model. How close is that going to be to reality? Still, well, first of all, what is reality now that we have so many doubts on the panel, right? Yeah, so the answer to your question is yes, they're listening. Is yes, we're making progress, but it's going to take time. It is going to take time.
Karina, what do you hear from the client side in terms of their concerns in this area? And do you think, the work that you put into better planning for multicultural audiences is something that will actually increase the interest from clients in getting this right?
Yeah, that's definitely the intent. I think a lot of clients are actually surprised to learn how many gaps and biases exist within the data that we utilize. So I think that has been an important part of the conversation that we're having with clients, that we do really need to question, validate the data to make sure that it is representative of the segments that we're trying to support. And if we start from that equity lens, I think it will help those investment allocations later on because we're able to build the right business case for them.
There's a relationship. Go ahead, Roberto.
Well, I was just going to say, this is such an important point because, and this is why this panel is important, is that we talked about these issues all the time, but as Karina says, we go to clients week in and week out, and they are surprised to learn about the gaps. And there are gaps everywhere. There are tools. Every day we are sold, and exposed to ad tech and research tools, which do not necessarily represent Hispanic and African American consumers in a proper way. I mean, even a lot of them don't have in language, surveys or interfaces or apps. And 85% of Hispanics are bilingual, but that doesn't mean they're willing to take a survey in English. So the gap goes beyond media measurement. Like it's important in a world of research and insights. We still have gaps in terms of multicultural representation.
It is a broader issue, isn't it? Beyond just TV measurement, just representation in all manner of data and measurement. I'm thinking about some of the information we've gotten back on the quality of third-party data providers and how often they're right. And we're talking about no better than a coin flip in some of these cases based on some of the analyses we're seeing. Are you starting to see some hope though that because you see some qualification of these third-party data sets that quality there is going to improve, and that they're going to at least be better at identifying who we're talking to?
I think the fact that we're having this conversation brings some hope, but we need more conversations and more actions, I think, from the industry as a whole to really address that underrepresentation in consumer and measurement data. And I think the data providers also need to be more transparent about the quality of their own data, because often, like, no one really questions the data. Like I said before, we need to start questioning the data. That really needs to become the norm.
And I think, Jack, there has to be some intentionality about the process. I think people can't assume that the process and the systems that they're using, just because you're going to put a little more attention to it, it's going to work. So to Roberta's point, I think people have to understand it hasn't, because there have been gaps consistently. So there has to be some intentionality. I mean, even with the census count, we know that there's gaps, big gaps. So there has to be some intentionality from all parties.
And Jack, I think the work of SIM and AIM and the ANA has been really important. And while it was there for a while, again, with competition and different players, it has sort of gained importance. And TruthSet and the work that TruthSet has done, coming in as a sort of impartial, third party looking at these databases and representativeness, I think that's critical. I mean, at the end of the day, the only way for these things to get better is when we have a reliable third party that can bring a POV about, who's making progress and where. So I think we are actually, in the last maybe 9 months, we have made more progress than we made in the previous 3 or 4 years.
Lewis alluded to this. When ComScore or Nielsen or VideoAmp or anybody's trying to create a representative sample, they're building that out of U.S. Census data. But there's a lot of reason to believe that the census undercounted people of color, and actually it was a bit worse this time than it was 10 years ago. Is there any alternative for the marketing industry to look at to at least improve on those numbers at all, or is just getting census level representation the best you can hope for?
Well, I think, Jack, the industry has to start owning it and taking it seriously, and they have to sort of push initiatives to make sure that people can really be counted and represented fairly. So I think whether it is the ANA or whether it's AIM or whether it's the VAB or any of these trade groups, they need to start saying, hey, we know we want it to improve, and we're willing to invest resources and time to make sure that it does improve.
Karina, when you're looking at trying to create a representative audience, do you ever go beyond the census, or is the census really the best thing we have to work with in terms of the raw numbers?
Well, I think with the 2020 census, given the undercounting, we do need to boost the samples, right? Like, we need to make sure that these communities are properly represented and that we're giving these consumers a voice. So I think it's important for marketers and researchers to really do our part in making sure they're properly represented and boost them when needed.
And the Census Bureau has, done its follow-up enumeration survey, coming up with their estimates of how much they undercounted things. Is it reasonable to, go off of that and try to boost the sample for some communities of color as a result of that?
Yeah, I think it should be used as guidance. I think they provided a pretty detailed report that I have seen, particularly how it has affected Black, Hispanic, and Native American communities. So I think researchers should definitely use that to rebalance those samples.
Is there a marketing effectiveness argument to be made that resonates in the industry that, folks are just missing out on a strong part of their market by not adequately measuring it? And is that something that resonates at all with marketers as you see it, Lewis?
missing out, I think they're almost hurting themselves because their buys, their money is not being effective because they're using the wrong data or data that is not correct. Let's put it that way, data that is not correct. So I think it's changing how their dollars are weighted towards one group or another. So I think it creates this sort of cycle effect of bad data in puts bad results out.
By the way, yeah, these challenges are particularly important in ad effectiveness, because if you do not have the right, panel or sample to understand who bought a certain product, you may be underrepresenting the return on investment from an investment in Black media or Hispanic media. And therefore, brands are thinking that their effort was less effective than what it really was, because you're not just getting the right sample on the back end of who bought the product. So it's a two-edged sword. You're not measuring the return on investment correctly, and when you're planning, if you don't consider this consumer, you're missing on these consumers that are unseen, under-marketed, and a huge source of growth.
Well, thanks, everybody. I think that takes us to the end of our time for today. I'm going to turn things over to our Ad Age news editor, EJ Schultz, and Derek Lewis from PepsiCo to talk about how big marketers can scale multicultural efforts. I think that dovetails with what we've been talking about. So looking forward to hearing from you, EJ.
Thank you, Jack. Hello, everyone. My name is EJ Schultz. As Jack mentioned, we are going to talk to one of the biggest marketers, advertisers, companies in North America today and learn a little bit about how they are scaling their multicultural efforts through various programs that cover many areas. And joining me to do that is Derek Lewis, who is PepsiCo's newly named President of Multicultural Business and Equity Development. Hi, Derek.
EJ, how you doing?
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, as always.
Before we get started, I want to remind our viewers to please ask any questions you have in the chat, and we'll get to many as we can as we go. So, Derek, I mentioned that this was a newly named role for you, but you've been at PepsiCo for a long time, I think 34 years. So before we get into some specifics about your new job, I would love for you just to kind of give us a quick glimpse into your journey, how you started at PepsiCo and how you ended up in your current position.
Well, I guess, EJ, you can call me one of those OGs. I have been around for 34 years. Campus hire, attended Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, growing up in Washington, D.C. And, Pepsi was always one of those companies I wanted to join. Certainly always appreciate the values they had. Thriving business portfolio brands at that time, different today, but so at that time, very, very strong. The support for the minorities, African Americans in particular, growing their careers across the company. So it was a very attractive company on many levels. And I was really fortunate the opportunity to get hired, started in Baltimore, Maryland, and really have grown my career from there, working in different parts of the company, different parts of the organization. I've been in selling roles, commercial roles, some brand roles across the time, operating roles, senior operating roles. And so, I've just gone where the company's taken me. I put a lot of trust in what they've asked me to go do. I've enjoyed every single role I've had, and just blessed to get to serve as many years as I've had in this company.
So I think through that varied experience, and you've touched many pieces of the company, many pieces of the operation, I think you're sort of uniquely qualified for this job, which I'll let you explain it. But I believe that the biggest part of it is basically being a connector, right? Connecting all the different parts of this massive organization around multicultural and equity development. You were doing this a little bit in the South Division, I know previous, but you just took this current role for the entire company in February. Can you give us a quick update in your own words on what this role is about and kind of how it's going so far?
Yeah, it's a new role, and I'm very, very excited to, again, have a chance to lead this effort for PepsiCo. Take a lot of pride and passion in the work that I have done, the people I've worked with have done over really my entire career, but things obviously really accelerated within the last couple of years, given all the challenges that have happened in our society. And so we, team decided to really put some next level effort against it. In addition to running the business, we also took on this racial equality journey work that the company was sort of very proactive at announcing a significant amount of resources to be applied to the marketplace over the next 5 years. We took that to the next level in the South and created really a model that was really end to end, where the, call it REJ, racial quality journey, was embedded in our day-to-day business. And you know what we saw from that is a boost in our results. We saw a boost in our communities, and we saw a boost in our culture. Our associates were so proud and thrilled that we would lean in such a way at the company level and the executive level and really the entire leadership team and the geography to do things that were the right things to go do, but also make sure it was linked back to the business, right? So we made it pretty turnkey for leaders and operators and really all the way through the front line to embrace this as part of the job. And when we did that and did it in a very authentic way, produced obviously really strong results. Still a lot of work to go do, but there's a model that's in place now that we are implementing across North America. We're looking to scale. And so as president of this new organization, we're going to work with our team to continue to address business inequalities to drive better results inside and outside our company. This is a very critical next step for PepsiCo in its racial equality journey. Again, we've made significant pledges and investments over a 5-year time frame, and we're paying that off. And we're going to really try to achieve really next level. Good momentum, a lot to feel good about, but obviously a lot more work to go do. And this team is going to be built to capture the best of PepsiCo, one team approach across North America to do the work. So we'll continue to impact what we do across people, business, and the community pillars that have been really at the center of the racial equality journey for our company.
So let's pivot a little bit into some specifics. One of the programs is called Pepsi Stronger Together. And I believe this was actually launched in the early days of the pandemic, but it's become a lot more than that, right? Can you explain what this program's all about?
Yeah, it is. You said it right. It has something that has really grown tremendously. And it really started out as a response to just what was going on with the pandemic. Our team locally here developed a program that really was reaching out to the frontline healthcare workers in the marketplace who are obviously under very lot of pressure. And our frontline associates and associates all who were supporting essential businesses. We know those people were that woke up every day looking to serve the market very, very trying times. Strong Together was there to provide relief to them where we could, aid, meals, support in any way possible. And what came out of that was the need to do more. And the voice of the community really articulated us that, hey, there's so many more pressing issues that are going on in the community right now. How can we use this platform to expand that work? And so we started really getting creative and agile and started pivoting resources to this tailored approach, market by market by market throughout our southern footprint. And you know what? It really brought a lot of smiles. It brought certainly some relief in very, very stressful times, put smiles on faces, of course. And, it really started to really get after something that could be done much, much bigger. We started to bring partners on. And so it just naturally scaled off of an effort focused really on the pandemic, became something that could really deal with and solve for more issues that are all really community-based, based on the voices of those communities.
I know that I think this past weekend, right, you were involved in a program in Atlanta called the Strength of a Woman Festival that Mary J. Blige was involved in. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, wow. That was so powerful. I just got back late last night, but it was a busy week, probably starting midweek. Look, it took a village to pull this off. I want to first extend my congratulations to everybody that pulled this off. Mary's team, our teams, inside the company, brand teams, agency teams, our food service teams, our division teams. I mean, really, it was a tremendous effort by everyone to pull this off, really in about 8 to 10 weeks, because we just announced it right at the Super Bowl. So we didn't have much time to pull this off. This was the inaugural event. And I tell you what, it came off flawlessly. It was an unbelievable experience. What I say this event was, and really coming at it from a, marketing lens, that it was entertainment with purpose. So entertainment was certainly the center. But this was so much more enriching, especially for women, especially for African-American women, really all the attendees, the female attendees, and even I'd say the male attendees. It was a very rewarding and enriching experience. It was all about empowering, educating, and elevating. And so, when you brought the power of that together, it created really a huge undertaking for all the attendees, and it was special. So one of those end-to-end experiences that, entertainment, the focus point, but led with purpose. Now, in combination of that, we use our programming across our racial equality journey. So I think about Dig In, which is our really big food platform to support Black-owned restaurants. We brought that to life in a real, real big way, bringing visibility to Black-owned restaurants, having them partake and participate in the activities throughout the weekend. So they lifted their businesses that way. Plus, it gave more awareness to the program. Carla Hall was there as one of our biggest ambassadors. She's very, very well known and really gave us a lot of theater and excitement, engagement, and inspiration as she continues to do for us. We then also went to a City of Refuge. It was a local community-based organization, Families in Crisis. We offered $20,000 in grant money there and also provided clothing for their clothing bank. And so we want to, again, make this a real end-to-end experience, not just celebrate the entertainment. That's the swag part. That's the fun part. We want to make it more holistic, and that's what we did.
You talk about, we've talked a lot today about measurement. How do you, and I know, in talking to you in the past, you talk a lot about this is good for business, right? So how do you measure this, and how do you know that these programs are working more beyond than just, a nonprofit sort of side of things, but just for the company?
Well, I mean, look, the engagement was really strong. So first of all, the attendance was very strong. So, the messaging on this being an enriching experience was being conveyed from day one. It was just not about a big concert, which was awesome, by the way. It was really about this whole end-to-end, empower, educate, and elevate, right? So, we had young artists there, young creatives that got to put their talents on display for the weekend. We heard from a lot of business people, whether entrepreneurs, corporate executives, entertainers, to educate women as part of being part of panels and things like that to really uplift and provide a lot of nuggets and gems for people who are either trying to get in their own businesses or trying to survive and grow in the businesses they're in today. That was great. And then Sunday was a gospel brunch that I think was just off the charts in terms of inspirational. So people left there more confident. People left there better networked, and they had a lot of gems that they can use to go back and be successful in the endeavors that they take on. And then people also, I could say, got fit. They got emotionally fit, mentally fit, spiritually fit. You left that gospel, you just felt so renewed about the whole weekend. It was a perfect way to end a sensational weekend. But Pepsi Strong Together was in the middle of that. Certainly from a community activation standpoint, is also one of the main purposes while we were there on the ground in Atlanta. So a real thank you to, again, all people that pulled that off. And, that's how we want to show up. We want to show up and be end to end. Again, connecting it back to the business, connecting it back to the community, bringing our customers along, our partners along, people we do business with, people we can potentially do business with, or people we just can help. And that was just a really elevated, amplified level of doing that in Atlanta. But we're doing this work, really all over the country. And, we're going to take a city by city, neighborhood by neighborhood approach to, tackle as many as we can.
I know a lot of your work is involved in helping small businesses, and one of those programs is geared for Hispanic businesses. It's called Juntos Crecemos. Mm-hmm. And before, I want to ask you about that quickly, but we're going to watch a tiny video that kind of gives a little bit or good explanation about that.
Might be called Hispanic small businesses, but there's nothing small about them. And at PepsiCo, there's nothing small about our commitment to small businesses, because there's nothing small about their commitment to their community, to become an extension of its voice and their desire to move forward. For their familia, for their gente. With funds, grants, and coaching, we stand by their side every step of the way. Porque juntos crecemos.
So what is this a new program Pepsi is doing, or give us a little insight on it?
It came right off the heels of Dig In. So we created Dig In, in 2020. Juntos came right after the early signs of the Dig In success and the engagement awareness we built. We wanted to build a platform for Juntos as well to, again, reach those Hispanic consumers and bodegas and bring the same thing, uplift the business, create really great experiences, not only for the customer side of it, but the consumer side of it, bring about the best in PepsiCo to create that enriching experience while also allowing the restaurateurs to survive and thrive, especially coming through the pandemic cycle. So these two initiatives really are all about uplift, outreach and uplift, and making sure these operators, one, thrive. They have a vehicle for growth in the future. We're offering them different capabilities that we lean into. Different capabilities. It can be marketing capabilities, technology capabilities, staffing capabilities. I mean, our goal is to help them continue to thrive and survive in a vibrant way, and we're also having fun celebrating what we do best, brands and food, right? And so, you couldn't have built two stronger platforms inside these communities of color than Juntos Crecemos and Dig In, and we're just excited about the runway that both these programs have.
A lot of these small businesses are Pepsi sellers, right? Too. So there is sort of a business element of this as well. Is that if they do good, you guys do good, right?
There's no doubt. We are laser focused, obviously, on the industry, but let's make no mistake about it. You gotta make sure that you're focused on, driving the bottom line. So a lot of these customers we will end up doing business with, but we're focused on the industry as a whole. So industry matters first and foremost. Obviously, as partnerships grow, we can obviously lean in more and do more with those partners as they come on board. And so, just an exciting time, I think, to be in the industry and have ourselves participate in the way we're participating.
So we've been talking a lot about sort of what you've been doing externally, but I know your job also covers some internal things, including, increasing Black and Hispanic representation inside PepsiCo. I know the company in 2020 pledged something like $570 million to make this happen. Derek?
Yeah, $570 million is across all the pillars. So there's a people pillar, there's a business pillar, and a community pillar. So Stronger Together would be embedded in that. Juntos Crecemos, dig in. But from the recruitment effort, I can tell you, I'm really proud of the work we've been able to do over certainly the last couple of years. Again, we were doing this work in the South for many years. Again, my network and the ability for me to being around as long as I've been around, had a lot of relationships out there. So we've leveraged those relationships to really drive representation strong from a geographical standpoint. We're now going to use then that capability, sort of that insight, those relationships, our business model now to expand that across, the recruitment platform. So again, whether you're in a HBCU, high Hispanic institution, or predominantly white institution, we're going to look to recruit the best talent we can as possible, so we can create more critical mass at Camp Philadelphia. And I can tell you, our success has been fantastic in the last 2 years. We created this program called She Got Now. It actually now is in its 4th year. So this was well before 2020 when we kicked that off the ground. We're very deliberate about recruiting Black women, mainly off HBCU campuses. This will expand. But if you think about that Black woman, underserved, sort of underrepresented in corporate America, use this as a way to draw more awareness, more attention. So we get thousands of applicants. When we go to campus, we activate in a big way to draw more awareness to it. And so it's been something really successful, and also converting to full-time hires.
I know a lot of companies have made this a priority in the last couple of years, and we've seen HBCUs mentioned a lot when it comes to recruitment. What's your experience been like there? Is there more competition as, just representing PepsiCo as you're at these campuses trying to recruit talent? Or how can you just give us, you're probably on the front lines of this. What's the market like right now? And what are your secrets to success?
Yeah, there's certainly more activity picking up. I would say certainly a lot more companies are wanting to get involved. I think you got to have the right ground game, though. I mean, schools aren't just going, I went to an HBCU, right? Schools just aren't, sure, you can show up and say you want to recruit, but if you don't have a connection with the students on campus and recognize, understand the culture that campus is all about and the environment's all about, I just don't think your efforts going to be maximized down there. We are a company that understands the culture, HBCU campus. I certainly understand the culture on HBCU campus. So when we show up, again, we show up in a way that is multi-tiered, multiple pillars to it, not just we're here to talk about jobs. We want to talk about, how we can enhance the curriculums. We want to build next role relationships with the faculty, within administration. We want to, bring our brands to life and celebrate our brands in different ways with sampling. We want to use dig in. For example, when I show up at homecomings, I bring in dig in partners there to celebrate the food experience with minority-owned restaurants, Black-owned restaurants. So we do that. And then we have community give back elements as well. And so we'll, boots on the ground, we'll go out in the community and do backpack drives in the Boys and Girls Club, build houses or participate in those type of things. And so we want to make it, again, an end-to-end experience that recognizes where we're showing up, how we're showing up, and that what kind of company, who we really are. And so as you think about the recruitment opportunity, we can expose ourselves in a way that you see really the full end-to-end picture, and hope that, becomes at some point an advantage or something that attractive enough for students to want to come work for us in different roles, whether sales, marketing, supply chain, or other functional roles inside our company.
That's interesting. So it sounds like it's the strategy is more about than just showing up on the career fair day, right? It's kind of like you want them to know you before you show up on that day. Do you think other companies make that mistake? Like, okay, let's just show up on career day and, maybe we'll win over a few recruits that way. It takes more of an investment is what I think.
Yeah, I'm not here to be critical at all. I mean, I think everybody's trying to figure this thing out. Things are pivoting very fast in this space. And so I do think there's certainly more appetite. You do see more appetite from companies leaning in, which I think is a great thing ultimately for the students and for the schools. So I think the more companies that show up, the better. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to see all these students get hired. So I think that's great. I think how you show up and how you go about the work, I think will differentiate companies in terms of their effectiveness on campus, because the buzz goes around. And so even when you're not there, you want to leave an impact and impression that students and the faculty administration are still talking about you, you're not there. And therefore, you're going to get, create again more of a halo for your company and for the type of work that you're doing, and for students to want to stay engaged with you somehow, some way, right? And I think that's the key to building sort of long-lasting, sustainable relationships on campus.
So I want to again remind our viewers to put any questions in the chat if you have one. I'm going to pull one for you. I know you're not technically in a marketing role. This is kind of a marketing question. We'll give it a shot, though. The question is from Robert at YouTube. He says, does Pepsi layer its multicultural marketing to its overall inclusive marketing, or are they one and the same?
Okay, does it layer its multicultural marketing? It does. I mean, from what I've seen, the brands, it's all about the insights, right? And so we're a company that absolutely thrives on insights, and so we don't act without insights. And I think each brand or each category has different aspects of how the consumer is reached, and the purpose behind reaching those consumers. And so I do think that there are there's some commonality to the approach, but I think you also have to get very tailored at the needs are for the Pepsi team doing something different than the Life Water team versus the Lipton team, Starbucks team. So I think everybody's got a different approach at how they ultimately want to connect. But again, I think done with purpose, right? At the end of the day, not just, focused on building a penetration and awareness and consumption, but ideally at the end of the day, linking it to something bigger, more promising, more emotional for those consumers that creates the loyalty that you ultimately want to have day in and day out, right? So I do think that, marketers have to stay very agile with that and very connected. Again, we want to be very connected to that to help them bring out the best in those activities or those on the ground games, activations that happen on the ground. We want to be a resource in making sure that experience is done right and done the best way to maximize the investment, but also maximize the impact to the consumer.
So I know a lot of your work is behind the scenes. It's community service. But I'm curious, how do you decide when to publicize something? I mean, it's good for people to know what Pepsi's doing when it comes to this kind of stuff, but you don't want to tip the scales and look too kind of self-promotional, if that makes sense. I mean, I know, in the wake of 2020 and George Floyd's murder, we saw so many companies come out and make so many pledges. And there was some criticism at times about maybe companies just sort of not living up to their words. How does Pepsi approach this philosophically from that perspective?
We absolutely want to walk the talk. I mean, there's no reason why I would not have taken this role if I knew we weren't going to be walking the talk. I'm going to walk the talk. The organization's going to walk the talk. So we'll be true to what we say. Now, we're not going to get it right all the time. So we're not here to tell you that we're perfect. We have a great history of doing good work here. We also have lessons learned in this space, no doubt about it. But the path marching forward is, in my mind, a very optimistic one, one that will be resourced appropriately, one that will make sure we connect back to the business, and also one that's connected across PepsiCo so that we are truly leveraging our scale to drive the greatest impact in the market. And so, I think that's our approach.
You talk about lessons learned. Could you enlighten us on one of your lessons learned during this?
I mean, I think there are a lot of lessons. Well, I think, look, there are a lot of lessons that have been learned over time. I've been around a long time, so I could probably spend another hour or two going through the lessons I've learned personally. But look, we all have the right intent. The thing is, we always come from a place of good intent, but sometimes you can get ahead of yourself in some ways, or you might have missed a communication opportunity or opportunity to collaborate on something, and therefore the product that reached the market didn't play out the way you wanted to, and it creates maybe some pressure, maybe creates some news or whatever. I'm telling you, now is a new day. We are pressing forward in a very, again, positive way, optimistic way, a very lean oriented way. And there are probably going to be mistakes. I'm not sitting there signing up for them, but just the fact is, when we're trying to do so much good work at the scale we're trying to do it, we're probably going to have something not exactly play out the way it'll play out. Now, I hope in the scheme of things, that we are, measured on the great in totality, what we're doing, the authenticity of that work. And at the end of the day, because a company of our size and scale is putting so much on the table, that will be able to drive a lot of impact. We'll have a great story to tell. So it's not about it all tuning our horns, about getting authentic work done. I'm a believer that if you do good work, that work translates back to good business. And I think that's my approach of doing this. We don't need to use this as an opportunity to go out and showboat or anything like that. We just want to get work done. We want to put smiles on faces. We want the communities to thrive and survive. We want consumers to have great experiences with our brands. We want to recruit and look like the marketplace. We want small businesses to thrive. I mean, who doesn't want that to happen? You know, we all want that, right? And that's what we want. And so we're going to go out every day and do the best we can to drive that and fuel that. And our best support all this is our business partners out there, our customers, our partners we work in the sports leagues, you know, tremendous partners. And so the more work we do together with our partners, the more impact we can make and scale. So we also don't look at this as we're going alone this journey. You know, we are absolutely always open and open to have people work with us and join forces to maximize the effort. Because again, it's about putting smiles on faces out there and providing relief and support to those that certainly need it the most.
So for people watching that might be in roles similar to yours, I'm wondering if you might be able to share a little practical advice about how you make sure you're plugged into enough of what's going on at PepsiCo so that you can be helpful, but not being like overwhelmed with meetings or, you know, just jumping from one meeting to the next, but being able to provide your perspective on things, and then you're able to take those and pivot them into the piece of the business that you're working on. But without getting, you know, overwhelmed by bureaucracy, which I'm guessing is a little bit of a risk at a company the size of PepsiCo.
We're a large company, make no mistake about it, you know. But again, I think what we demonstrate is that we're so committed to this work that we're doing something that has never been done before as our company, right? So the fact that we're off the ground in this new business unit is a really strong signal. We have received so much support from the leaders across the organization, the associates. They've been very enthusiastic. External partners have been very enthusiastic. So, you know, I'm really encouraged, I mean, by where we are right now and the start of the journey in terms of support standpoint. Now, what we have to do, we've got to work hard. We've got to make sure we can drive connectivity, keep our agenda very simple and clean. We know what the outcomes are and what we want them to be, but we've got to drive connectivity. We've got to absolutely scale initiatives across the company in ways that benefits the entire system. We got to build new capabilities. We're going to be an organization that brings new capabilities to this space so everybody can really see the end-to-end aspect of this. And we want to do it as really one team. So we shouldn't be seen as, you know, one team and another team, and 4 different teams working on something. We should be seen as one team. And so our ability to sort of echo that, reflect that, and really keep that top of mind as we go around and do our work across the enterprise, I think keeps the agenda very simple for us, and everybody knows where we're coming from, right? And so I think from a starting standpoint, I think we're off to a good start. A lot of more work to go do, but I love this culture. I tell you what, when our people really believe in something, they get behind in warp speed, and I really have a great sense that, you know, the things that we want to scale faster, things we want to become, you know, really next level at, we're very, very close to getting there. It's going to be, you know, incumbent upon myself and my team to drive that and fuel that. But this organization is remarkable when it gets behind things, and the hearts are in the right place on this. So I feel like it's just a matter of time, and we'll have some good things obviously to share periodically with you on that journey. But we're in a great place, and we're going to be in a great place going forward. And, you know, we're going to work as hard as we can to do it. So
you have a picture of Beyonce behind you, right?
Absolutely. That was a swag photo moment from the 2013 Super Bowl, where again, legendary. We've had some legendary Pepsi halftime shows. I think this year obviously was epic in Los Angeles, and this is just a bit of a canvas wall we had created. Just again, you know, we're a cool company too. We want to come into work, and you know, when you come in this office or get to come in this room and do a call, you know what, you get a little bit of swag when you walk in and see Beyonce, and you think about that magical moment back in 2013 and all the ones that have followed. You know, it gives you real optimism of who we are. We're a fun company, but one that does care a lot about its consumers, its communities, its customers, and its associates. And, you know, having reminders of that as you walk the halls, I think puts you in the right space to do what you do and keep you energized and keeps you hungry.
Is that something you use to your advantage? We talked about recruiting earlier, right? I mean, that's one of the advantages. I mean, Pepsi has worked with so many stars and celebrities over the years. Is that something you freely talk about when you're at HBCUs or elsewhere trying to recruit talent?
I mean, I've been here for 34 years. So, you know, I always get asked the question, why so long? How have you stood the test of time here? And I talk a lot about it, the portfolio, the people, and the purpose, right? I try to keep it real simple. I mean, our portfolio of brands is, I think, unparalleled, you know, in terms of the size, scale, you know, functionality, and just the quality and enjoyment that you have, consuming our products, not only on the beverage side, but also the food side. I think our people are next level. Our frontline associates are the hardest working, most dedicated individuals I've ever worked with, Alfie. I've only worked with one company, but I wouldn't want to trade our frontline associates, associates that are really in the moment of truth out in the stores every day, in the warehouses and the factories. Wouldn't want to trade them for anybody. And then I think obviously our management teams, leadership teams, executive teams, all the way through the most senior management, our board of directors. It's just an awesome group of people who really do stand behind you. You call your family. And I've been fortunate and blessed enough to call this my family for 34 years. And then purpose, right? I'm in this role I'm in because we are fulfilling the winning with purpose agenda. And so as a company that also, while they want to win and do it well and do it consistently, also wants to make sure we're doing the right things and do it the right way. And standing up this organization is, again, just one example of many examples of us doing that work to help make society a better place as well.
Okay, Derek, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you again for your time today and keep in touch.
All right, EJ, thank you as always. Appreciate the love.
All right.
Thank you for what
Derek.
you're doing. See ya.
That ends our programming for today. I want to again thank all our viewers, and I also want to thank our sponsors, our co-presenting sponsors, CMI Media Group and the Collage Group, and our supporting sponsor, Numerator. Thanks again to all our viewers, and remember, you can check out all our coverage around multicultural marketing on adage.com. Thanks again, everyone. See you next time.